Hello and welcome back as we gather together for our devotion time as we read from Adam Hamilton's book, Jesus and the Outsiders, Outcasts, and Outlaws. Today's reading is titled, Lessons from Jesus' Final Journey. In Luke chapter 10, Jesus sends out 72 disciples to the towns and villages of the region, commissioning them to heal the sick who are there, and say to them, God's kingdom has come upon you. The story raises questions. Who are these additional 60 disciples? Where did they come from? They must have been following Jesus. Were some of them the women we've learned about following him? We don't know. But what we see is Jesus preparing them for his departure. The day will come when he will no longer be with them. This is his succession plan. He sends them out in pairs, without him, and he tells them to do what they've seen him doing. He's getting them ready for his death. When they return, he celebrates what they have done, encourages them, and tells them he has given them his authority over all the power of the enemy. It is here in Luke chapter 10 that Jesus makes clear what the two great commandments are, shares the parable of the Good Samaritan, and eats with Martha and Mary. It is on this journey, in chapter 11, that Jesus teaches his disciples the Lord's Prayer. But it is also here, on the journey, that the conflict and tension grow between himself and his opponents. In chapter 11, some in the crowd, presumably the religious leaders, claim that Jesus casts out demons, not by God's power, but by the power of the prince of demons. I have had people say hurtful things about me over time. I'm guessing you have too. But I wonder what it felt like to be Jesus, God with us, healing the sick and casting out demons, and to have some in the crowd say that you are operating by the power of the devil. Perhaps this is why Jesus' tone begins to change. Or perhaps it is simply the fact that Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem to be put to death at the behest of some of these religious leaders, and that his time is short, that Jesus becomes harsh with the religious leaders and their rules. Look at Luke chapter 11, verses 37 through 54. The Pharisees criticized Jesus for not ritually washing his hands as their rules required. In response, Jesus unleashes a series of critiques that were quite harsh, as if to say, Really? You're upset that I didn't pour the cup of water over my hands for ritual purity before I eat? Listen, you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and platter, but your insides are stuffed with greed and wickedness. Foolish people! Didn't the one who made the outside also make the inside? Therefore, give to those in need from the core of who you are, and you will be clean all over. This is actually the gentlest of the comments Jesus makes to them. Notice his line of reasoning. You are worried about ritually purifying your hands so that nothing sinful or dirty goes into you while you eat. But you don't care about the unclean thoughts, your selfishness and self-righteousness that are on the inside. It would be like, he says, washing the outside of a cup, but not the inside. Then he offers this one little line that touches on what we learned in the last chapter. Give to those in need from the core of who you are, and you will be clean all over. The act of generosity to the poor actually serves to cleanse our hearts and souls. Yes, in that act we lift up the lowly, we become instruments of God. We deny ourselves and take up our cross. By chapter 12, a crowd of thousands upon thousands have gathered to hear Jesus. Why here and now? And who is in this crowd? It seems likely it is once more the uncouth, the bumpkins, the uneducated, and the unobservant who were nonetheless hungry for God. Jesus goes on to say, watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees. I mean, the mismatch between their hearts and lives. He tells them to not be afraid of those who can kill the body, but instead to fear the one who controls your eternal fate. Then he comforts his disciples and the thousands more who are listening. Aren't 5 sparrows sold for 2 small coins? Yet not one of them is overlooked by God. Even the hairs on your head are all counted. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. The backdrop to these sayings in the journey is the journey Jesus is on and the destiny that awaits him. Sometimes when I preach, I am preaching to me before I'm preaching to anyone else. I wonder if Jesus, as he is saying these things, is not only comforting his disciples, but reminding himself that he need not be afraid, because even the hairs of his head are numbered. It is in the context of this journey that Jesus teaches about money and possessions. Watch out, guard yourself against all kinds of greed. After all, one's life isn't determined by one's possessions, even when someone is very wealthy. And, once more, he speaks of caring for the poor, the lowly. Sell your possessions and give to those in need. Make for yourselves wallets that don't wear out, a treasure in heaven that never runs out. No thief comes near there, and no moth destroys. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be too. I'm skimming these chapters. I hope you'll read them on your own. There's so much power in the words Jesus teaches on his journey. Take a look at Luke chapter 13, verses 10 through 17. Jesus is in a synagogue on the Sabbath. The rabbis had rules about what you could and could not do on the Sabbath. But Jesus sees a powerless and infirm woman there, feeble and frail, bent over. She'd been disabled, Luke says, by a spirit for 18 years. When he saw her, Jesus called her to him and said, "Woman, you are set free from your sickness." He placed his hands on her, and she straightened up at once and praised God. Can I tell you how much I love this picture of Jesus? He knows what he's about to do is against the rules. Furthermore, he is in the synagogue, and there is a religious leader there. But he cannot help himself. This woman has been in pain for 18 years. This is one of the things I hope you will remember about Jesus. Jesus put people ahead of rules. The synagogue leader is undone, and he chastises this woman and the crowd around. There are 6 days during which work is permitted. Come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath day. I'll let you read Jesus' response in Luke chapter 13, verses 15 and 16, and how the crowd responded in verse 17. Notice, though, that he saw the woman. Notice that he had compassion for her. Notice that he refused to let her suffer any more, Sabbath or not. Take a look at verse 30, where Jesus articulates the great reversal in the clearest way he could. Look, those who are last will be first, and those who are first will be last. And then turn to Luke chapter 14, where once more Jesus articulates the attitude God seeks of his people. He's sitting at another of those dinners a Pharisee is hosting for him. This says that Jesus hasn't totally alienated the Pharisees just yet. There are still some who are fascinated by him. Or are they hosting him in order to trap him? The dinner opens with another test about healing on the Sabbath, showing once more Jesus' compassion for the sick. But it is what happens next that I want you to notice. Jesus noticed how the guests sought out the best seats at the table. The fact that today most committed Christians routinely try to take the lesser seats, the seats on the end of the table where you can't hear so well, or the seats with your back to the stage, or the seats with the odd cousin no one else wants to sit with, is because we know this parable. Even so, we know which seats we want. We want front row center. We want to sit at the cool kids' table. Jesus tells a parable about a wedding and then says, all who lift themselves up will be brought low, and those who make themselves low will be lifted up. I'm reminded again that Jesus sought out friends in low places. Remember, as we learned in the last chapter, that Luke chapter 15 begins, all the tax collectors and sinners were gathering around Jesus to listen to him. The Pharisees and legal experts were grumbling, saying, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. He goes on to tell them the parables of the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost boy, all expressing the heart of God for those who have wandered from the fold of God, and God's joy when someone who had wandered away comes back again. He loves the outsider, the outcast, and the outlaw. I don't know how that resonates with your heart, but it fills my heart with joy when I think about this. It gives me hope, personally, for the many ways I fall short of God's will. It gives me hope for the people I know and love who are not yet following Christ, that he loves them like the shepherd loves the one lost sheep, and like the father loves the prodigal son. But it also fills my heart with joy that the God that we love and serve, who came to us in Jesus, has a heart like this for sinners and tax collectors, for the lost and the broken, for the people who have wandered from him. And it reminds me what churches are to be like. The welcome they are meant to give, the people they are meant to love. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time.